Central rivals go head-to-head this weekend when the Pirates face the Cubs at Wrigley.
Swing and a miss. He struck him out.
The pregame at 3 Eastern, first pitch at 4. Saturday on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app.
Coming up on the Best of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast, Greg McElroy is in Tuscaloosa for the SEC Network Spring Football Tour. Chris Lowe says there is no reason Texas and Texas A&M shouldn't play. And, of course, your phone calls. It's the Best of the Finebaum Show podcast, and it starts right now.
This is the Best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Let's also welcome in Greg McElroy, the former national championship quarterback from the 2009 season at the University of Alabama. He is in T-Town today. And, Greg, thanks for the time. I guess you don't need a GPS to get around campus, do you?
I know my way around, even though it has changed significantly in recent years, Paul. I know you, having lived in Birmingham for a long time, are very familiar with the way Tuscaloosa is. But I tell you what, it is a different place in the last couple of years than it once was when I was in school. Of course, I feel like I graduated forever ago, too, so that might have something to do with it.
Well, Greg, the biggest,
good to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
The biggest difference since you left at the end of the 2010 season, they've added 2 more national championships, in case you haven't noticed.
I have noticed walking through the Hall of Champions, those trophies are very lovingly displayed in bright colors. And the SEC Championship trophy from a year ago still has some of the blue, yellow, and white confetti on it. So fitting enough for Alabama to make room in their trophy case for yet another SEC Championship.
Well, and the question many, I'm sure, have asked you, and we will ask you, can they do it this year after that devastating loss last year to Ohio State?
It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very, very difficult considering the talent that is around the entire SEC and the turnover that they've had, not only at the quarterback position, that's where everyone is focusing their attention, but on the offensive line, that's really concerning. The loss of a playmaker like Amari Cooper and the loss of a Christian Jones and DeAndre White, who were very serviceable in their time here in Tuscaloosa, makes you a little concerned. So all the turnover offensively has you a little bit worried. But when you look defensively, particularly at the defensive line, the versatility that they have with some of the individuals they have up front, being able to move them inside and outside and go to a 3-man rush and then back to a 4. If in short yardage situations they want to get to a 5-down line, they have the capability. Along with Ole Miss, I think there are few teams in the country with that type of depth and versatility at the defensive line. And as we know, if you want to compete at the highest level in the SEC, you have got to win the line of scrimmage. Alabama most definitely will be able to do so on the defensive side of the football. Now, will they be able to do it with their new offensive line breaking in some new pieces? That remains to be seen, but they have a great starting spot with a center that has started a lot of football games and a left tackle that is arguably as talented as anybody.
Greg, last year we were both down in Tuscaloosa for the spring game, and walking out of there were a lot of confused fans. The team looked pretty good on certain in certain aspects, but the quarterback race seemed way up in the air. We hadn't seen Jacob Coker, but hardly anyone could believe Blake Sim was going to be the starting quarterback. What's it look like? Of course, Blake proved us all wrong, but what's it look like going into the spring game Saturday?
Well, right now it is genuinely a 5-horse race. They have toyed with Cooper Bateman, seeing if he's capable of playing other positions as well as quarterback. He has since moved back to the quarterback position. So 5 guys vying for the opportunity to be the next starting quarterback at the University of Alabama. A lot of people talking about Jake Coker. He has progressed. Now, is his accuracy up to the point where he can really be competitive week in and week out in a league that requires top-tier accuracy to be successful? That's the question. Will he be able to play fast enough? Watching him last year, he seemed a little methodical, but I think part of that had to do with his lack of comfort in Lane Kiffin's system. Only running it for a very short period of time, that's to be understood. He's feeling more comfortable, he's playing faster, and he has had a much better spring than most had anticipated relative to the way he left last year. But other people have surprised. David Cornwell, for instance, the freshman from Norman, Oklahoma. And I say Norman, he was only there 1 year in high school, but I will say that because that is the place he last played football prior to being here in Tuscaloosa. He has a lot of game. He has some intangible qualities. He has the things that Nick Saban likes when he's evaluating quarterbacks. The ability to distribute, the ability to command in the huddle, and the ability that it has a presence in the locker room where his leadership and confidence will permeate to the other 11 guys in the offensive group. So that's going to be a huge issue for him. Talking to Nick Saban today, he says he wants to go with a guy that limits turnovers, makes good decisions with the football, and makes every single person around him better. Whoever does that the best out of the 5 will, in fact, be taking the snaps in Tuscaloosa.
Finally, Greg, you mentioned Nick Saban. He came under rare criticism 2 weeks ago after he discussed the Jonathan Taylor situation. You played for him. You've been close to him. You've watched him from close and from afar. What's his mindset right now? I realize you were talking quarterbacks and other things, but has that case moved on, at least in his head? Because he did take a beating from a lot of people in the national media.
If there's ever anything that we've learned from Nick Saban, it's his ability to focus on what's in front of him, not necessarily what's behind him. He's very much focused on how this team can improve, and he's not necessarily dwelling on the issues that have occurred in the last several weeks. I did ask him about it. He did touch on it. He says that it's unfortunate that a group of 85 men, or even 125 men when the new freshmen and new walk-ons do get here in the fall, are characterized by the actions of very few. And he said he does not believe that this is a group that really requires a lot of concrete stability. He believes and trusts in this group. He feels like he has great leadership and leadership in various position groups. Ryan Kelly, most notably up front. The quarterbacks, all 5, have done a remarkable job. Derrick Henry's a guy that everyone can lean on offensively, and obviously has the track record and the success on the field to be able to prove that. Defensively, Reggie Ragland's a guy that everyone has looked at. They have some guys in the secondary that are young but have made enough plays to where people will respond when they have things to say. So he was disappointed that maybe an entire team was characterized by the actions of just a couple, and he was disappointed in that. But if we've ever learned anything from Nick Saban, we know that he's focused on the next step. After the national championship in 2009, he reminded us that's not the way we finished the game, in the huddle, in the locker room, after the game. So he's always focused on getting better, always focused on what hurdle he next has to conquer and overcome, and that is no different in this scenario.
Greg, you weren't ready to proclaim this next year's national champion. Let's stick with the SEC as we wind down. Just looking at it, you've been to many campuses for pro days and part of the spring tour. I mean, if you had to make a pick today, where would you go?
I think it's going to come down to either the Alabama Crimson Tide or the Georgia Bulldogs. And frankly, if I look at Georgia and I look at what they have coming back, they were arguably one of the better teams in the SEC last year, had some unfortunate circumstances against both Florida and South Carolina, both games in which they were better than the team they played against and they were not able to finish. Nick Chubb has emerged as a star. They have a great defensive group. Jeremy Pruitt's an outstanding coach. And frankly, when I look at Alabama, it strictly comes down to the fact that if a college football playoff had been in place in the last 7 years, Nick Saban would have participated in 6 out of those 7. So at the end of the year, in 6 out of the last 7 seasons, he would have been in the top 4. So how can you not look at the consistency that program has shown? Look at how competitive they've been on a regular basis. Now they will have some challenges. The West will once again be very difficult. Ole Miss should be good. Auburn should be very good, depending on what Jeremy Johnson's able to do at quarterback. There are a lot of good programs in the West, but Alabama, because of the consistency that they've shown, leaves me with the fewest questions.
Greg McElroy live in Tuscaloosa as the Tide gets ready for its annual spring game on Saturday. We'll talk soon, Greg. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Always fun.
This was the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Let's continue with more phone calls. And Lance did not make it in first, but he is in. And Lance, good afternoon.
Hey, Paul, I'll wait 4 hours just to talk to you, so don't worry about that. But let me say this. I'm not tired of Daryl calling in and talking about Jim McElroy all the time. I mean, what's more Rick done? He's been there 15 years and ain't never been to a national title, Paul. I mean, I'm pretty sure if Will Muschamp would have got 15 years on the job, he could have won 2 SECs. That's all Mark Richt has done. I just don't understand what the hype on Mark Richt. I know you're not real high on him. I know you sung that song, He's a Jolly Good Fellow. But come on, man. This guy is a choke artist. He's not even a choke artist because he can't even get to the big game to choke in it. You understand what I'm saying to you? They got a new quarterback, a new offensive coordinator. Wide receivers have always been average. I mean, they can't stop the run. Just check the Florida tape. I just don't understand, man. If you couldn't beat Florida last year, what makes everybody think Georgia's going to win the East this year? I can't get it. Help me, Paul, help me.
Well, it's
What do you
recruiting. It's a lot of things, but mainly recruiting, and they put a really good program together there. But you're right, and like Brian said, from Florida, for whatever reason, Georgia finds a way to lose games that no one really saw coming, like the Florida game last year, like the South Carolina game last year.
Even Fort Farmer has the national championship. I just wanted to know that. But hey, Paul, let me ask you: was Brian Schottenheimer? What was it? Did Nick Saban interview him, or was looking at him for the offensive coordinator job about 2011 and 12?
I think at one point he did talk to him. Yes.
I thought I heard that, but I wasn't sure. Even Nick Saban was smart enough to know that Brian has no shot in the SEC. That would be a done hire. But Georgia figured that out the hard way. But tell me this, man. I can understand the Tennessee hype, but this Georgia hype's crazy. I don't see how any analyst in America can look at the schedule and see over 7-5. I just don't, man. It looks tough to me. Georgia Tech, Florida, Alabama, Auburn,
at Tennessee.
I mean, when you play Alabama and Tennessee back-to-back like they do, Paul, I don't know how they're going to get that emotionally high. And plus, they play Alabama first. Win or lose, you're going to get beat down physically. I just don't see how they're going to rise above, man. With a brand-new quarterback, I don't get it.
Thanks, Lance. Appreciate the call. Let's go to Ron next, down not too far from Gainesville in Ocala, Florida. Hey, Ron.
Paul, you got me yesterday, bro. I was rusty.
Good to hear from you.
You got me good. You said what?
Good to hear from you today.
Yeah, good to hear from you too, man. Muschamp. Let's talk about Muschamp real quick. Everybody talking about Auburn going to win the West. They're not winning the West because they got Muschamp, okay? This guy right here talking about the cup bearer was full and all this. Man, we barely had enough offensive linemen to even do a spring game. So I'm not even going to touch him anymore. But for everybody to be talking about Georgia, when we beat them last year, our defense is better, and now we've got somebody who actually understands X and O's. Trayon said that now he can read a defense, and he's a second-string quarterback. Greer looked excellent. DeMarcus Robinson is faster. Tennessee, they're decent. They'll be there with us. But I'm telling you right now, we run the East. Let me tell you why, because Tennessee was behind us. Gary Pinkel, if you want to hang your hat on Gary Pinkel, is great. I think he'll be up. They'll be up there too. But I'm not going to just hang my hat on just a coach. Now, when you got the best SEC defense, Missouri, I'm telling you, they're not going to be able to hang with it. McElwain and that whole all-star staff, along with the players, is going down, Paul. You're going to be wearing that jersey, and so is John.
We shall see, Ron. We shall see. I'll tell you what, we're barely into the program today, but some serious trash talking from Florida fans in relation to Georgia fans and back again at the Gators.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Andy is up next in Ohio. Hey, Andy.
Hey, Paul. The only thing that's better than the ongoing arrogance of Alabama and Auburn fans is this widespread delusion that's taken over the rest of the SEC. I mean, the Mississippi schools getting ready to break out. Since when? Like the first time since the 1940s? You got people calling in here saying the power of the SEC is shifted to the state of Mississippi. I mean, come on. We couldn't even get through a season without, whizzing all over yourself. How things go in the bowl series. And beyond that, I mean, we've got all this back and forth between Tennessee and Florida right now. You remember when Florida beat Tennessee last year and Muschamp started sort of running his mouth in the postgame?
Of course I do, sure.
And he's taking shots at the fans there, and he seemed petty and childish and like he hadn't been there before. Hey, that's what they sound like right now, the fan bases collectively. I mean, you're in the SEC East. I mean, when's the last time the SEC East has been a factor in anything? You better back up and watch out for Mizzou and Matty Mock, that Ohio boy who's been crushing that half of the division the rest of the time. And I guess the last little news nugget that came out yesterday after I called in was that Urban Meyer got himself quite the raise up here in Columbus. You notice that, Paul?
So what?
Well, the fan base is happy about it. So apparently if you just win and you get a raise, that's a lot better than holding your entire fan base hostage for like a month and act like you don't know about everything else that's going on.
And what fan base would that be, Andy?
Well, I heard we're going to get Nick Saban over here in Texas. everybody, Shorty's coming over here to Texas. So, I don't know. Nick did that a couple of years ago, and things haven't panned out so well since then. I don't think he's getting
Well, Andy, I mean, you say it hasn't panned out very well since then, but, the
fan base has been a little more quick to take up against Saban because I think they remember how they felt when they thought they were going to be jilted by Saban, just as LSU was before them and just as Miami was after that. So,
Andy, when Saban arrived at Alabama and you first started calling in the show 2 or 3 years later, I mean, how many times have you predicted Saban would leave Alabama, and how many times were you wrong?
I thought Saban was going to Texas. I did, and I was wrong. Apart from that, I don't remember outright predicting it, but. You know, there was so much around Texas rumors.
Well, my point is that whether you predicted it more than once or not, there have been many experts who have said repeatedly, oh, Nick Saban won't stay at Alabama. Nick Saban had walked out on LSU. Well, the bottom line is Nick Saban has been in Tuscaloosa since January 3rd, 2007, and he's not going anywhere. So, I mean, that's why when I pretty much said I'd bet my career on the fact that he's staying at Alabama 2 years ago, and people like you laughed at me. I felt pretty comfortable in what I was saying. By the way, not that I was putting much up as collateral.
Yeah, but I just think that I think that he's burned up some of the personal capital that he'd already earned.
Do you really? Do you really?
Yeah, I do. And I think you can hear that in some of the callers. So.
That's an interesting question. Then we'll pose that question.
All right, thanks, Paul.
Oh no, we'll let that simmer for a moment. But how much goodwill did Nick Saban burn up during that, and maybe losing to the great Urban Meyer? I haven't really heard much of that. I don't know where Andy's coming from. Of course, Andy obviously has a pipeline to Tuscaloosa, being a lawyer in Perrysburg, Ohio.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
The last caller, I hate to quote him, even though I will, Andy from Ohio, wondering if Nick Saban burned up some goodwill, or how much goodwill has he burned up with that dalliance with Texas, and then the fact that he lost the bowl game to Oklahoma after the amazing Auburn loss, and then last year's collapse at the end of the Ohio State game. Are you guys buying or selling what Barrister Andy had to say?
I think Nick Saban's earned the right to do whatever he wants with the titles, personally. Getting on top of that mountain stuff. Staying there and getting recruiting classes and everything that he's done. If his recruiting class fell to like 10, 11, then yeah, you can kind of see something like people getting, hey, Nick Saban, you've outstayed your welcome. But he had the #1 class.
Outstayed his welcome.
Well, we lived it. I mean, this last off season, or with the whole Texas rumors, Andy, he did call that Saban would leave, and I think a lot of people felt that way. Paul, you mentioned that you stood pat in your belief that he would stay, and you ended up being correct there. But I look back to. It was an article, I think, in the Wall Street Journal, the other half of Team Saban, about Terry Saban saying that the Alabama fans aren't very appreciative. That comment there, I think, made it feel more real than it was. And Saban's silence along with that story.
Yeah, I mean, I could make an argument that since that field goal was returned for a touchdown, it hasn't quite been the same for Saban, and you can. I mean, the dalliance with Texas was probably closer than I thought it would be. And as I wrote in that book last year, Texas was willing to literally spend anything to get Saban to show up there. Saban denied it 100 times, but I think it came closer than we really were led to believe at the time. So. It's hard to say. I think the loss to Ohio State was devastating. We lived it here on this program. He clearly made a mistake last week or 2 weeks ago in the Jonathan Taylor case. So things have not been perfect for Nick Saban, but he's still the most popular person in the state of Alabama.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Jerome is in Birmingham. Jerome, you still high on Nick Saban?
Hey, Paul, I'm always high on Nick Saban, Paul. I'm always high on little Nick. What makes you think I changed my mind?
I just asked you a question, Jerome.
Well, listen, you talking to a diehard Alabama fan, Paul. Never when I lose faith in Nick and the Tide. You hear me, Paul? It just done pissed me off the last 3 or 4 years. But other than that, Paul, I'll take little Nicky to be my general and lead me in the toy anytime, Finebaum. You hear me? Anytime. Now, my question to you is, Paul, what makes you think Ole Miss going to be a surprise team this year?
Well, I mean, listen, they have a lot of really great defensive players. I'm not convinced. Again, you know, they have some injuries. I mean, Treadwell, I think, is getting better. I'll be there in a couple of weeks, so maybe I'll have a better idea of what it's like on the ground, Jerome. But I just have a sense that the schedule is manageable. We've already talked about the 3 tough road games, but I think Ole Miss is going to be very competitive next year.
Ole Miss ain't gonna be nothing, Finebaum. Listen, I'm glad somebody finally decided to tell you to eat a Snicker. You know, you done came back to reality. It's football. You can rest assured, Finebaum, we don't have to hear nothing else from Kentucky fans. You hear me, Finebaum? They can hide. Their season is done. Football is irrelevant in Kentucky, Finebaum. And I tell you one thing about the SEC. Like always, Finebaum, it's like normal. The Tide will prevail, Finebaum. Have a nice day. Roll Tide.
Thank you very much. Charles is up next in Kentucky. Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Hey there.
I'm doing good. How are you?
Okay, thank you.
What are you thinking about Kentucky making it to a bowl game this year?
Well, I think it's possible. I mean, you know, you look at the schedule, and what do you need to get to a bowl game? 6 wins. Can you find 6 wins on the Kentucky schedule? I can.
Yeah, I can too. I think we won 5 last season. We was 1 short of going to a bowl game last year. And all the hypes about our basketball team, I think we need to win something on our.
I tell you what, let me look at. I'm looking at the schedule right now for those who can't see it. Lafayette is a win. At South Carolina, probably a loss. Florida, Missouri. Is there a win in those 2? I think Florida is a possible win there. I'm going to go 2-1, 3-1 against Eastern Kentucky. Lost to Auburn, at Mississippi State, Tennessee. Let's see. I see 1 win, 2 wins, 3, 4. Boy, you got. I don't know. Anybody see 6 wins on that?
I think we got Louisville too, and Vandy.
Okay, you have a shot at winning the last 3 games. At Vanderbilt, Charlotte, and Louisville. But Louisville is a pretty good team. I mean, are you convinced you can? I'll say Vanderbilt, Charlotte are two sure wins. I would give Eastern Kentucky 3, Lafayette 4, maybe Florida 5. I am still having a hard time.
Tossed up finding the 6th.
Yeah, I mean, if Louisville, if you turn Louisville, but after that, I'm not sure where you have a 6th win.
Right.
I think it's going to come down to the Louisville game.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to come down to Louisville.
And right now that's a game that would be virtually impossible for me to predict. Louisville doesn't Louisville open against Auburn, so I mean Louisville will be tested, and we'll see. Hey, thanks for the call. Appreciate it very, very much. Daryl is up next in Georgia. Hey, Daryl.
I would say that Kentucky is going to pull it up Tennessee next year. I believe that.
Okay.
And they're not going to win the East, but they're going. Kentucky better be. You better be ready to play when Kentucky shows up.
You agree with me? I do think that they have a shot at beating Florida at home.
What, did they beat Florida last year?
Some people think they did, but officially they didn't.
Oh, okay. That's right. That's the game went over.
That was the game, yeah.
Florida down the flop.
Pretty controversial game.
But we got a shot at beating Florida at home, but Florida's going to win the East. They're going to go from the Birmingham Bowl to the East. Absolutely. Now we know why Urban Meyer and Steve Spurrier left Florida, okay? Because the fans like Lance. That's why. That is exactly why. You know what? Georgia, we always point out how Georgia blew the game they should have won, but nobody talks about the games that they won that they probably could have lost, like the Arkansas game last year, the blowing Missouri out 34-0 in Mizzou. I mean, you know what? All that's last year. I mean, right now in Tennessee, Paul, Tennessee has not been anything. It all went bad for Tennessee when Mark Richt went up there his first year at Georgia. And we beat them we pulled the hobnail boot on them. Ever since then, Tennessee's went down the tubes, and it probably started when they lost David Cutcliffe. That right there, David Cutcliffe was. Do you agree David Cutcliffe is a very good football coach?
I think he was a great coach, yeah.
I think he is a great coach, too. I mean, he's looking at what he's done at Duke, and I think he had a lot to do with the success that Tennessee had when he was there on the former big time. Now, I want to say this, Bob. I'm going to tell you when Saban's going to leave. You got to, hey, say whatever you want, okay? But obviously he's thought about it. You know how close he was to taking the Texas job, so obviously he has thought about it. But here's the deal. He's never had an 8-3 season or anything like that here recently. I mean, they've been doing good. But as soon as that 8-3 season rolls around, or the 3-loss season, I believe Dansby and Nick Saban is going to pack it up and head out of town because he's not going to take the criticism. He's going to say, "I'm out of here." I really believe that.
What evidence, Daryl, do you have that Nick Saban can't handle criticism?
Oh, Nick Saban cannot handle criticism because he doesn't accept it. He'll bite your head off in a minute. Okay, here's the word right here. If you like the word expectation, do not bring up the word expectations around Nick Saban. He does not want to hear it, and I just don't think.
No, you're right about that. That is a word. I remember the very first time I interviewed him in his office. I was warned, don't bring that up. And I simply said to him, I said, "So what do you expect?" He said, "I don't talk about expectations."
Exactly, and that right there. And that's you know what? How is Alabama? Tell me how they're going to do so good with Coker. I mean, he couldn't get on the field last year. What, now all of a sudden he's going to be some really good quarterback? I just don't see it. I believe Auburn's going to win the West. We will see. I'm ready to see that quarterback Auburn's had. He's supposed to be big time. I believe Auburn's going to win the West, and we'll get a rematch with them again, and we'll beat them twice in the SEC championship game. And we do own Auburn, by the way. 7 out of the last 9 in counting. See you.
Some pretty good football conversation. We have Florida fans trashing Georgia fans trashing Tennessee fans and Alabama fans and everyone else. So I think you can tell we've made that transition back to college football.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Paul is up next in Florida. Hey, Paul.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. First of all, I'm a beloved Buckeye diehard. But besides that, I have 2 quick points, and then I'll let you go. Well, I don't understand why everybody gets on Saban and Meyer for the amount of money they make. I mean, if you look at over their careers, first of all, they've earned that right. Look at the number of national championships they've won between them. So that makes no sense to me, and the revenue they bring into the universities. I mean, how?
Well, you know what, Paul, you're right, and I think the media sometimes is responsible for that, but Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, these coaches are investments for the university. And quite frankly, when you look at the bottom line, they're not big investments. It's really it's a drop in the bucket, as the cliche goes. So, I mean, when you talk about hundreds of millions of dollars earned off of winning football, and that's not even talking about what a winning football program means to the endowment. So, for the $7.5 million that Saban gets, and his staff gets X dollars after that, whether it's $2 million for Kirby Smart or under that for Lane Kiffin and other coaches, you take a chance, and that's why I always just laugh when I hear schools say we're not going to pay that. Well, you have to pay it, and if you don't pay it, then you get what you deserve.
Well, here's what I don't understand. Okay, fine. Urban Meyer just now makes almost $6 million a year. But paraphernalia, Ohio State was like $2.2 billion.
Sure.
I mean, the numbers don't communicate in my little brain.
Well, but Paul, that goes for any business, okay? And I'm not here to tell people what they should pay their employees, but usually there is a reason. I mean, sometimes you can't overpay, and usually when you do, that is corrected. That's what business is all about. But college sports is a tremendously large business.
Oh, yes, I agree. It's a corporation.
Sure, and there are very few people in the business that can make a big difference. Now, if you look at the SEC or the Big Ten, if we went down the list, we could probably come up with a couple of guys who are underpaid and a few who are overpaid. But Nick Saban and Urban Meyer would not be overpaid.
That's my point. I agree with that 1,000%. My other quick question is, I think people are overlooking Ole Miss in the SEC. I mean, I'm a Big Ten diehard, and I'd say an Ohio State diehard, but I think Ole Miss is probably somewhat of a sleeper in the SEC East. I'm sorry, West.
I tell you what, I don't know if I rolled out of bed today and agreed with you, but I'm beginning to after listening to a few people make mention of that. I think Ole Miss was discounted, and thank you for the call, Paul, but I think a lot of us discounted Ole Miss because of the way the season ended. Injuries occurred. The Auburn game was turned on the final play in a haunting fashion with Treadwell's injury. Arkansas was as close to a disaster as you could find, and I've said this a couple of times, but I'll say it again. I was in Oxford the morning of the Egg Bowl. It just didn't feel like that was going to happen. And then when Ole Miss pulled that off, I think the season ended fairly well. And just as you thought it was going to be a pretty good year, the disaster occurred in Atlanta. So, but give Hugh Freeze credit. He hasn't let it affect him. Recruiting may not have been up to 2 or 3 years ago, but it was respectable. But I think people are selling this program very, very short in the upcoming season. I really, Ole Miss's schedule is tough, but it's not impossible. And Ole Miss last year with Auburn and Alabama, they won the Alabama game, they lost the Auburn game, they won the state game. They were 2-1 in the Big Three. If they're 2-1 on the road this year in those 3 games, they'll win the SEC West.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We'll check in next with Jamie in Baton Rouge. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay.
Love your show.
Thank you very much.
Hey, earlier you were talking about the Ole Miss schedule. You went down the entire schedule, and you failed to mention the LSU Fighting Tigers beating them. You were trying to find a team that could possibly beat them.
Yeah, you are very perceptive, Jamie, and I think you want the explanation for that. I'll be happy to give it to you. I think it's becoming more difficult to believe that LSU is what LSU used to be, and I know that game is legendary. I've covered LSU football before. I follow Ole Miss very closely, but right now I have a big question mark by LSU. LSU is this is what you'll hear about them. If they can figure out the quarterback situation, they have the talent to contend for the SEC West.
We have Les
But
Miles.
will they? Will they?
We have Les Miles.
Okay, so what?
We have Leonard Fournette.
No, well, let's talk about
We
Les
have
Miles
Cam
for a second,
Cameron.
okay?
Cam Cameron.
Cam Cameron has not proven anything so far in his
He
career
led
at
the
LSU.
Baltimore Ravens.
I don't care what he did in
Super Bowl,
Baltimore.
And then went to LSU.
Means absolutely nothing.
Have a good day. Go Tigers.
Okay, now we have a new subject. Why do I care what Cam Cameron did with the Baltimore Ravens? I care what Cam Cameron has done in Baton Rouge. And so far, I don't know Cam Cameron, but so far I think he's done a pretty lousy job. Let's continue. Alan is up next. Alan, thank you for the phone call.
Hey, Paul, how's it going?
I'm going great. It's going great. Thank you.
I just wanted to touch base about these Georgia and Florida fans. I think that, first of all, Mark Richt is a great coach, but he chokes throughout the end of the season. It seems like some of the games that you would think they would win, they don't win, obviously. And the fact that these Georgia and Florida fans are just talking so much about Tennessee is just crazy to me because of the fact that the last 2 years in a row, Tennessee has been right there at the end of the game to beat Georgia, and to my opinion, should have beat Georgia last year and should have beat Florida last year. So for them to say that Tennessee is not even going to be a contender in the East at all is just absurd to me.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the call, and it's good to hear from you. Let's check in with Jonathan, who is in Tennessee. Hey, Jonathan.
Hello, Paul. I'm a first-time caller. I'm glad you
Good to
took
hear
my
from
call.
you. Thank you.
I'm a little worried about the hype that they're kind of giving Tennessee. I know that they're not giving them just a big hype, but we've been down for so long. You know, in my opinion, I don't think we ever should have got rid of Philip Fulmer to begin with. But now I like Butch Jones. I like the way he's handling the team, and but I'm just a little scared about the hype. So I was wondering what you thought about that.
Well, listen, you have to, as Butch Jones has said repeatedly, you have to be willing to embrace the expectations. But I will tell you this, Jonathan, if Tennessee doesn't get past Florida and loses to Georgia and Alabama and all the usual suspects and has another mediocre season record-wise, the buzz will be over and the pressure will be on. So this isn't a matter of extending this conversation forever. It simply goes into the season, and Tennessee has to deliver. I'm not saying Tennessee has to get to Atlanta. I don't know if that's realistic or not. I think it's possible. But if Butch Jones lays an egg here, you won't have any hype this time next year. I promise you. Let's check in with Al in Georgia. What's up, Al?
How are you, Paul?
Good afternoon.
I was calling, I'm a Georgia fan, and I'm tending to agree with the media people about Georgia being the favorite. However, they drew the short straw with Alabama and Auburn from the West, so I don't see how that's going to work out. As far as Florida is concerned, someone on your show last week, I believe, said that they really only have 58 people on scholarship down there at this point. And I don't see how they'll be able to compete, throughout the season. They may be pretty good on defense. Don't know about offense, but with 58 people on scholarship, it'd be very difficult for them to compete for 12 weeks. And as Tennessee, I agree with one of your previous callers. They should have beat Georgia and Florida last year, but Worley was the quarterback at the time. And one thing that no one has brought up is about Dobbs is why wasn't he the quarterback all year last year? Worley was the quarterback until he got hurt. Dobbs came in and did a good job. I'm not saying he didn't, but then he did lose, the final game there to Missouri. So I'm not sold on them yet, but the fact of the matter is that they could have beat Georgia and Florida last year.
No, you're right. I think Tennessee is in an awkward position because it plays Oklahoma early on, and listen, we can all make fun of Bob Stoops, but that's a dangerous game, and you lose that game, and then you have the Georgia-Florida swing, and I mean it could go very badly for Tennessee if they're not careful. Last year, Butch Jones had the expectations, the buzz. He got off to a pretty good start. The Oklahoma loss really didn't affect them very much. The Florida game, interestingly, did not hurt them as badly as I thought it would. They got that game back with that epic collapse by South Carolina late in the year, and then they didn't turn the Missouri game, but the schedule was pretty friendly to them with Kentucky and Vanderbilt late in the year. And the bowl game helped create a lot of the buzz right now. I mean, I could see Butch Jones going, calm down, everyone, but you don't want to stop buzz when you're trying to build a program. You have to embrace it.
Right, I understand. I appreciate you taking my call.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate your call. If you'd like to give us a ring, you can do so at 855-242-7285. Will is down in Mississippi. What do you say, Will?
Hey, Paul. How you doing, buddy?
Okay, buddy.
I kind of want to make a comment. Two things, though. One about Cam Cameron, you're totally right. He doesn't develop quarterbacks at all. I mean, it's the only quarterback that did good the last 5 years was Mettenberger, and Georgia really developed him.
Yeah, and listen, when I said what I did about Cam Cameron, it's not personal. I don't know Cam Cameron. I know it is, but what he did in Baltimore is not germane to this situation. It doesn't make a bit of difference.
It's irrelevant. You're right. But, a lot of this Ole Miss talk, I graduated, I'm sure you probably heard of Mississippi Gulf Coast Community. It's kind of a national JUCO power, and Chad played at East Mississippi. They won it last year. And I went to the game with him, and we gave him a lot of crap, as crowds do. And early he was pretty quiet, but then he put up almost half a 50 on us and did the, he kind of gave the crowd a little bit of power and started doing the scoreboard type thing, kind of like Bo Wallace. So if he does win the job, I think he's just going to be a carbon copy, maybe a little more talented, similar. I mean, I just think it's going to be the same for them.
Well, yeah, listen, I think whatever he's done wrong in the past will be corrected. I have faith in that program and in Hugh Freeze, but I think Ole Miss has a little more momentum than some people. I think a lot of folks are writing them off. Now, the problem is everyone can't have great records in the SEC West. We go from hyping Ole Miss to hyping Arkansas. We forget sometimes that LSU does exist down there. Auburn, Alabama. I mean, it is endless. A&M. We do this every year in the SEC West, and someone has to pay the piper.
Notwithstanding, I mean, as an LSU fan, I'd gladly have them on my team.
No, but I think realistically, Will, I mean, if you're looking at the SEC West and saying which program could be the disappointment, I think LSU is you could make a case for LSU.
Well, 8-5 wasn't too good last year, was it?
No, it was terrible. I mean, I know it was 10-3 the year before, but I think Les Miles has pressure on him. It's been a long time since he's beaten Alabama. It's been a while since this program contended late in the year. And frankly, that's what LSU fans expect. I don't need to tell you. You are one.
Right. You're the man. You're right. 100%, buddy.
Yeah. We can be tough on Cam Cameron. I mean, all he has to do is develop a quarterback this year. He has two. I think he actually has one. And if he can do it, then LSU is a factor. They weren't far from being one last year, but they didn't make it.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Chris Lowe joins us on the program from ESPN. And, Chris, always good to catch up. Usually we're pummeling you about what's happening in the SEC, but we do want to broaden this a little bit and talk about what you've recently had to say in relation to Texas and Texas A&M. What about it?
Well, first of all, can you believe, you're a college football fan like I am, that these two teams don't play? I mean, it's just, when you look at all the great rivalries in college football, it's just, to me, it's insane that they don't. But had a chance, Paul, to talk with both Kevin Sullivan and Charlie Strong last week. I was out in Texas. And both of those guys are on board with playing this game again. They think it's important to the state. They want to play it. I think in Sumlin's case, now that he's been on the job, going into his fourth season, he has a better feel for what this game means to a lot of the alums, the former players, the people in the state of Texas, and Charlie as well thinks it's something that needs to happen. So let's see if the people that can make it happen are willing to get up off their you-know-what and make it happen.
Yeah, and as you well know, you know better than we do, the two coaches being forward, that is great. But what about the administrators? What's the latest on that?
Well, I think both sides need to sort of swallow their egos, swallow their pride a little bit. You know, Texas talking about we're going to play on our terms when we play again. A&M said, well, we'll play maybe in a BCS game or a playoff game. Both sides need to come together and get this thing to make it happen. I think we've got new AD at Texas, relatively new AD, Steve Patterson. We'll see what happens there. I know that both schools, Paul, have some marquee non-conference games scheduled in the next few years. Texas has Notre Dame. They've got USC. They've got LSU. Texas A&M has UCLA. I think they've got Colorado as well. They also the Aggies play Arizona State this year. So it's not going to happen right away. But in the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years, I think there's a chance you might see some movement.
Yeah, and I don't want to go old school or new school, Chris, but if you're just driving around in the middle of the desert somewhere or watching us in Boston, why would this game be so important when you just got through saying Texas is playing Notre Dame, A&M plays major Power 5 conferences? Why does this game late in the year, and I assume that's when it would be played, I don't know, or whenever it's played, mean that much when you consider all of the marquee games we now have in college football?
Well, within that state, it's a game that's been played for 118 times, going back to the late 1800s. I mean, so I think it's ingrained in the people in that state, the fans on both sides. For so many years, they've played it there on Thanksgiving weekend, sometimes on Thanksgiving Day. You've had all the great tradition, the bonfire, which you go back to that tragic accident there, I guess back around 2000, when some people were killed, and both sides really came together. I think that's one of the parts of rivalries that maybe we don't see all the time. And I think just in the state, what it means to the people there again in the state. Here's the other thing. Some people that aren't college football fans are just going to watch some games because it's what they are, Auburn, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan State. I think Texas A&M is another one of those games. No matter where you are, no matter what, how big a fan you really are of college football, Paul, you're going to watch that game.
But some would argue, Chris, depending on the year, if we are so in the past BCS conscious, now we're semifinal and college football playoff conscious. And I don't know whether that game would remain on that weekend or not as the opening game, or somewhere else it might have more punch. But if Texas is creeping along at 7-4 and A&M is even or about that, you put it up against some of the biggest games on the Thanksgiving weekend calendar, or even on Thanksgiving night, up against a pro game or another game. Is it as big a deal as it used to be? And I get what you said, but still, it depends on the circumstances, doesn't it?
Yeah, maybe. But, I mean, is Florida State as big a deal?
Some years it is. I mean, but Clemson, South Carolina this year, I mean, both teams were pretty crummy. Outside of the state of South Carolina, who really cared?
Right. 2 years ago, they were both top 10 teams. So you're right. It's a cyclical type thing, and I'm talking about Clemson, South Carolina. It's a cyclical type thing for everybody. But I think when you look at that state and those two teams and their tradition, there's no reason that they shouldn't play. And listen, it's a new world with college football. You're right. Everybody's trying to get into that playoff. What can you do to do that? I think the committee sent the message last year that you're going to have to go out and play good teams. I don't think there's any question, though, that when Texas and Texas A&M lock horns most of the time, it's going to be a game that for both sides is going to count for something.
Chris, you make your living in the SEC. You've been around various schools. Certainly, we talk about this every day. What are the big stories? And this year, there doesn't seem to be that one overpowering story, that we're not talking about Alabama repeating or Alabama trying to get back, or last year it was the college football playoff. Would the SEC get two? I mean, this league has certainly taken some knocks. What is the biggest buzz factor that you hear when you travel the SEC right now?
Well, in the SEC, I think it's probably the quarterback crop. I mean, when you look around, this is such a quarterback sport right now, the game, and it always has been, but I think more so than ever when you look at the offenses and the way teams are scoring points, the way teams are playing. Outside of Dak Prescott at Mississippi State, I think who most people would say is absolutely the top returning quarterback, you look around the league, Paul, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Ole Miss, a lot of the teams that have had success here recently, who's going to be their quarterback? There's not a lot of answers right now. In fact, most of these teams are finishing up spring ball and saying, well, it's probably a work in progress. We'll know more once we get to the preseason. I think that's the thing that sticks out to me is, especially when you look at how driven, quarterback-driven the game has become, there's a lot of question marks right now in the SEC about who's going to be throwing the football for all these teams.
Finally, Chris, Nick Saban 2 weeks ago came under rare criticism for his comments in the aftermath of the Jonathan Taylor case. We really don't know a lot more about that case. He pled not guilty in Georgia. The case in Alabama, last I heard, was still up in the air. You spoke with Saban. You were the first one to speak with him after his ill-fated press conference carried live on ESPN. Talk a little bit about that conversation and your takeaway.
Well, he knew that when he took the kid, and he told me, he said, we knew it was going to be a risk. And then he felt like when it went bad and you had the other charge, and he knew on Monday when he had his press conference that the accuser had come forward. Not that it means anything, but had come forward and said that, she had made up the story, this, that, and the other. His thing, and I think the thing he kept harping on to me, and he admitted he probably didn't get his point across the way he wanted to in the press conference, was that just because this one went bad, it was not going to cause him going forward to quit giving some kids he felt like warranted second chances. He admitted he didn't handle the press conference well, and I think the thing that he was most disappointed in himself about is he came across as being insensitive to the whole issue of domestic violence. And he said, in no way, shape, or form would he ever want to do that. That was not his intent. His intent was more, listen, if a kid, in my mind, warrants a second chance, this situation is not going to cause me going forward not to give him one. And I think that probably what happened, I think, is because of the whole seriousness of the domestic violence. And let's face it, it's something all across society now that all of our awareness is up, that he came across in that situation as being pretty insensitive to the whole issue.
Chris, I realize people have bad days, but you spoke with him right after the fact. I mean, considering the importance of that, I mean, that wasn't that was the story of the day in college football on that Monday. What do you think happened with him? I mean, he's usually so good in front of cameras.
Well, but you know him pretty well, too, though. He's a guy that when he thinks he's done something right, and even if it doesn't go the way he wants it to go, he's going to stand his ground. And I think that's probably what happened there. And you're right. Sometimes, you're trying to say something, you're trying to convey something. We've all been in this position, and maybe it doesn't come out the way you wanted it to. Nick's not the kind of guy, Nick Saban's not the kind of guy who's going to come out many times and say, I was wrong, I was sorry. And I think that's probably what happened there. He is sorry that it reflected poorly on the university, on the program, on everybody involved. I can promise you that, having spent some time with him that week, he's not sorry for taking a chance on the kid. In fact, he said, listen, it's one of those things what we all take risks. We're sort of in the risk-taking business as coaches. I don't think I made the wrong decision. I just think it didn't work out the way we all hoped it would.
Finally, Chris, I mean, we're spending a lot of time on this program talking about buzz, enormous buzz, and you live there about a program and a coach that's 12-13. We talk about like Tennessee's about to break through. Nick Saban has won 4 national championships. He nearly won 3 straight, something that it would have been historic. He played for in the semifinals of the first college football playoff. He was in a BCS game prior to that, but still there seems to be like something is missing there, that this program isn't heading in the wrong direction. Are they prepared to win another title? I know that's a lot of words there to ask you. What's going on with Saban right now? Is he feeling good about his place, or is he feeling a little heat from what happened last year and maybe the fact that some even dare say Urban Meyer is the best coach in college football?
I think he's feeling, Paul, I think he's feeling a new type of challenge, the kind of challenge he's never faced as a head coach before. I mean, he's never been anywhere this long. This is almost twice as long as he's ever been anywhere as a head coach. I mean, this is his 9th year. 5 years was the longest he'd been anywhere else before. And he admitted to me, he said, listen, this is a different challenge, a tougher challenge to have to sort of maintain, sustain, build on what we've already built. He's a builder. That's what he does. He's as good a builder in college football as we've seen maybe ever. But now, because of the monster that they've created, you're right, and you said it. They go to the playoff last year. How much have you heard people talk, Bama fans, college football fans, about the fact that the Tide won an SEC championship last year? 0. But they did win an SEC title. That's almost an afterthought. But that's sort of where they are now. He understands that. I think he's, in a lot of ways, looks at this as, hey, this is something else for me to sort of conquer, to go in now and try to win more championships after everybody else expects nothing but a championship. It's a heck of a standard to be held to, but I think there's no question that he and that program are up to it.
Chris Lowe from ESPN and ESPN.com. Chris, many thanks. Always good to visit.
You bet, Paul. Take care.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We were talking during a break that what if the Gators lose again, or the Gators beat Tennessee again? What did you guys tell me a minute ago, that Tennessee has only beaten Florida 4 times in how many years?
Since 1993.
Oh, my goodness.
From our researcher, Brian Ives, by the way. I wanted to throw him out some love.
Glad we did. That's hardly a rivalry anymore, but we'll keep hyping it until we're told we can't. Let's go back to the phones at 855-242-7285. Been a busy show so far, and let's check in with Nathaniel in Jacksonville. Hey, Nathaniel.
Hey, Paul. How you doing?
Okay.
I'm a first-time caller, and I've got to watch your show. It's great.
Thank you.
I'm a Tennessee fan. I live in Jacksonville. So you know what I'm going through with all these Gator fans. But this year's going to be different. You got to look at, when you got the number 5 recruiting class in the nation back to back, and no one going to the NFL. I think that'll turn the season around. So that's what I'm looking forward to this year.
Well, thank you very much. Well, let's talk about this Tennessee schedule for just a second, Nathaniel. Though, right now, I'm not an odds maker, but I would be willing to bet Tennessee will be a slight underdog to Oklahoma, Georgia, and Alabama. That's 3 games that they will not be favored to win. Florida, let me correct myself. They'll be an underdog to Oklahoma, Alabama, and at Missouri. No way they'll be a favorite at Missouri if Missouri holds up. There'll be a toss-up at Florida, Georgia, Arkansas. So you have 6 games right there that they will not be favored in. I'm not even talking about Arkansas. Well, actually, I am talking about Arkansas. I'm not talking about a road game at Kentucky there. So I don't know. That's if they're going to. Where are they going to? Where is the sure win of that 6? You have Oklahoma, Bama, Mizzou, Florida, UGA, and Arkansas. Let me ask you guys for a second. Which games do you have Tennessee winning in that among those 6? Boy, you got to keep this hype meter going, guys.
Yeah,
Come on.
Yeah, I know. Arkansas, I don't know about Arkansas.
I actually like them against Oklahoma.
I do too. Absolutely.
So that's the one that I would probably ride a little harder than the others. But after that, it becomes maybe Arkansas next in Florida. I think Florida. I think they're going to beat Florida. I don't know how many times I have to say
Florida,
that.
Paul. They could beat Arkansas as well. And this year they travel to Tuscaloosa. Mm-hmm. Am I correct there? That's a benchmark game for them. If Butch Jones is going to be out there.
Slow down there, John. Come on.
How many people on the show have said Tennessee has a chance to win the East?
But the East and the West, I
know it's 2 different programs, but we're talking about an Alabama team who doesn't know who's quarterback, has lost Amari Cooper.
Yeah, but this game is not on August 31st. This game is late in October.
That's a good point. I know, and trust me, I know as much as anybody how lopsided that rivalry has been, as it's been with Florida as well.
Yeah.
So, there's the numbers and the history does not back anything there. But if the hype train is real and Butch Jones is everything people in Knoxville has made him out to be, then why not put him up for a chance to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa?
Good point.
Yeah. Let me say it's a point. How about that?
Yeah.
Let's get some reaction from the calls at 855-242-7285. RV is up next. Good afternoon, RV.
Hey, good afternoon, Paul. You had a caller a couple of 3 minutes ago talking about LSU and why LSU was not getting any respect.
Right.
And my point against LSU would be that so many of the last 3 years that they've been playing has been that defense that John Chavis has had that has kept them in a lot of games that most teams would never have been in. And I think when they had the Auburn, LSU, and A&M switching coordinators, I think LSU, by far, got the worst end of that deal. Because Steele, was the coordinator at Alabama their first year when Major Applewhite was there, right?
Yeah, Steele was the coordinator the first 2 years, and then he moved on after that to go to Clemson. We know his story from there.
Yeah, okay. One brief comment on Tennessee. I hear a lot all the time about how Tennessee has done good this last November and all that. If they didn't win 85% of Tennessee's games in November, would they be any better than Kentucky?
Well, let me explain.
The schedule is so front-loaded that they almost have to win 70% of their games in November.
Yeah, well, that's always the way the schedule is, RB. But listen, I'm not trying to go Wall Street on you, but if you look at if you talk to the Sharpies on Wall Street, what's in a stock price? It's the expectations. And right now in Knoxville, it's all about the expectations. We know it's 12-13 after 2 years. I give Butch Jones credit; he's done all the right things to get this program the required amount of hype. But at some point, and that sometime is now, you can't have another 7-5 season or 6-6 and keep people believing in you. You're going to have to start beating people. and it's going to have to start right now. Florida State in overtime. But going into that game, my point, and maybe I didn't say it correctly, nobody really cared about that game outside the state of South Carolina. It was not an important national game. It has been in the past. It wasn't last year.
We did something Alabama didn't do last year. We beat Ohio State in the Orange Bowl. We beat LSU the year before that, and we beat Oklahoma.
And how have you done against Florida State in that game the last 2 years when it really mattered and the league was on the line?
How's anybody done against Florida State, Paul? They won 29 in a row.
Okay, well, I happened to be in Clemson a year ago when Florida State came in there and I think won. I lost track of the score. I think they were needing to add bulbs to the scoreboard. It was getting out of hand.
That was 2 years ago.
I said last year, meaning the season before. I mean, listen, maybe we just need to sit down and get the calendar, the schedules in front of me. But the bottom line is that that was an embarrassing performance by Clemson. But congratulations on your 10-3 season, and I think Clemson is going to be a big-time program in the next couple of years based on what I've seen and heard in recruiting and from coaches.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you calling. Can't wait for the ACC network to start. We'll give these Clemson fans somewhere to hang out in the afternoon. Jumbo is up next in Tuscaloosa. How are you, Jumbo?
Hey, Paul, how you doing? Boy, you really gave it to that guy pretty good. Hey, yesterday I asked you if they were going to do a 30-30 session on you, and the phone went dead and the power went off. So what was your answer to that? I missed everything.
I'm still trying to give me 1 second. I'm still trying to recover from that Clemson fan. And congratulations to Clemson, by the way, after losing to South Carolina 5 straight years and getting housed by Georgia last year. I'm glad they have everything back on track again. The answer to the 30 for 30 question is I don't know. I don't think there's a line outside the building here of directors and producers wanting to do that. But I'm glad you brought it up.
Okay, well, I think you're one of the ones that they should do it on because you really got all your stuff in one spot. Now, I want to hop on Tennessee and Georgia here real quick. Darryl, I'm not going to sit here and dog him out, but he's saying that Georgia will beat Alabama and that Auburn will beat us. But what he doesn't realize, and he said that they'll play Auburn again for the SEC championship game, I think every time Auburn's won the SEC, they've beaten Georgia. So, Darryl, if you want to put your money where your mouth is, I bet you a bottle of Jack Daniels, Alabama will beat Georgia. Then they'll go into Auburn and beat Auburn because Auburn is not going to be everything everybody says they are. So Alabama's going to get it together, and we're going to be just like we normally have. So Daryl's got to he's got to wake up here a little bit. I think he's overthinking stuff out there.
Thank you very much. And I don't want to turn this into I'm a big fan of Clemson. I do want to congratulate Clemson on putting 21 up against Georgia's 45 last year in the season opener as well. Let's check in with Linda next. Linda, thanks for the phone call. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul. I thank you for taking my call, especially today.
Sure.
And I'm calling on behalf of our dear friend Debbie from Kimberly. And please bear with me so I can get all this in for Debbie. I'm doing this for Debbie, okay? It's worse than she thought it was. She done a number on her leg. They're having to. She goes into Brookwood Hospital tomorrow, which I know you're very familiar with Brookwood, and she has to be there at 6:15. And she's having a surgery tomorrow. And I want to say this on a lighter note. She says before she goes under, she's going to call you, and you better answer your phone. But anyway, they're having to attach her foot back to her leg.
Oh, my goodness.
So, and they're going to put a plate on each side of her ankle. This is her left ankle and left leg, okay?
Now, Linda, let me make sure I understand correctly. This occurred when she was trying to do what?
This was late Friday night, the wee hours of Saturday morning, okay? Her dog has a bad disc, and the veterinarian said for her to keep the dog stabilized, even put it in a cage, until he heals some. And she was talking about that. She really didn't want to do it because he's a roamer and stuff, but she was taking him up the steps. I think she took him outside, okay? And then she was walking up the steps in her house, and he started wiggling really bad, and she lost her balance, and her and the dog fell backwards down the steps.
How is the dog? I know that sounds silly, but I hope that was the dog injured as well?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I guess she broke his fall to keep him from getting
so the dog
injured,
landed
you know.
on Debbie. I understand.
Yes. And then she went to the orthopedic surgeon this morning. Oh, and she wanted me to say this. His name, and he's at Brookwood, his name is Greg Carr. He played at Auburn, and he
I know Greg well. Greg played for Pat Dye in the early 80s. He went on to become, I think he may have played pro football briefly, may not, but he became
he played at the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, he became a very successful orthopedic surgeon in Birmingham, yes.
And that's who's doing her surgery. So, they're going to put 4 screws on each side of her ankle and a plate on each side of her ankle, and then a big bolted screw through the top of her ankle where her ankle ends and her leg starts.
Let me ask you this, Linda, what type, I realize you don't know until you do the surgery, but what's the prognosis if the surgery goes well?
Well, her prognosis is, of course, rehabilitation, you know, and it's gonna take quite some time, because she told me earlier today that it's going to take a long time for her to heal from this. To heal, and then they said about her ligaments, they won't know about her ligaments until they get in there, and if they're torn, they're going to have to sew them. They're going to have to repair them, sew them back together.
Oh my goodness!
It's bad.
Yeah, one thing I do know about surgery, the rehabilitation in any type of orthopedic surgery is critical, but this is way beyond your normal garden variety orthopedic surgery.
Right. This is like radical orthopedic surgery, you know, and it's bad. And I thank you for letting me get that out there, Paul, because she really needs everyone's prayers. I mean, earnest prayers. Anybody that prays, because you know prayer works. Anybody that prays, I want them to pray for her and her husband, because her husband has a severely bad back, and he's having to take care of her, so he needs our prayers too, you know?
Well, listen, Linda, obviously you're our contact on that, so please call and let us know what's going on.
I sure will, Paul. Every time I hear an update, I will be calling in on her behalf, okay?
Thank you, Linda. We're all thinking of you, Debbie.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We heard from a guy from the Big Ten a minute ago, from Columbus, talking trash. How do you respond to that? Can you guys help me out?
Paul, I'm going to bring up some games.
Okay.
This is the Finebaum Big Ten West SEC East Challenge. You tell me the winner. Wisconsin versus Missouri.
Yeah, where's the game?
Neutral sites.
Neutral sites.
Mizzou.
And you're going to throw in.
Okay, I get the pick suite. Mizzou.
Minnesota, Georgia.
Is that even a question?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Killed. Paulie's a good head coach.
All right.
I go dogs too, of course.
Nebraska, Tennessee.
Is Bo Pelini still coaching in Nebraska?
No, his cat's not there. No.
Tennessee wins that game. Right?
I don't. This year, Tennessee, but in the past, for the last 5 years,
we're talking about now. We're talking
about Tennessee.
We're talking about when Lawrence Phillips.
Iowa, Florida.
Iowa, Florida.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Kirk Ferentz, he's been doing it.
Has the makings of a 5-3 game all over it.
I'm going Iowa.
Okay. Illinois, South Carolina.
What about you, John? You going Iowa?
Iowa, yeah.
Yes. Illinois, South Carolina?
Yeah.
Does Illinois still play football? South Carolina.
South Carolina. We're in agreement of all.
We're getting into the hard hitters here. Northwestern, Vandy.
Northwestern.
Vanderbilt. Come on. Battle of the brains, by the way.
And Purdue and Kentucky.
Kentucky.
Boilermakers. I don't know.
I just say like that. If you look at it top to bottom, the SEC would win most of those games.
I mean, listen, there are 2 or 3 that they wouldn't, but again,
they can have Illinois and Iowa.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. The Big Ten East is good, though. Okay, as you know, it's maybe not as good as the
Is
SEC
it the legends or the leaders?
I don't know. I couldn't figure that out, so I'm glad they changed it.
The Big Ten. SEC network over the Big Ten network, though. I guarantee you that.
Thank you for listening to the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. Tune into the Paul Finebaum Show every day from 3 to 7 Eastern on the SEC network or on the ESPN radio app.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Major League Baseball on ESPN Radio. Last season, the Pirates reached the postseason for the 2nd consecutive season, only to be sent home early after losing the wild card. Will they return for the 3rd straight year? This weekend they face the Cubs, who have plans to make their first postseason berth since 2008. The Cubs and Pirates. The pregame at 3 Eastern, first pitch at 4. Saturday on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app. 2 of baseball's best go head-to-head in interleague action when the Tigers head to St. Louis to face the Cardinals. That one is gone. The pregame at 7 Eastern, first pitch at 8, Sunday on ESPN and ESPN Radio.